Hello students, we were doing India and Pakistan relations and we understand that their relations cannot be called even the normal relations and they their relations can be categorized as that of having an eternal rivalry. Fine. And this eternal rivalry has its origin in Pakistan's sense of insecurity. This eternal rivalry is because of Pakistan's sense of insecurity and from where Pakistan develops this sense of insecurity. Fine. So we have to understand that the fundamental problem of Pakistan is Pakistan's sense of insecurity. And you all know that psychologically a person who is insecure, not only he creates problem for others, he creates problems for itself. And what India has to do, India should not be aggravating, should not be doing that aggravates the sense of insecurity, but India should be doing that provides Pakistan a sense of security. But is it easy, or it is a very next to impossible task? So understand the fundamental problem of Pakistan arises because of Pakistan's sense of insecurity. Fine. And from where this insecurity generates, from where Pakistan's sense of insecurity originates. So, starting from the very fact this insecurity originates with the bitterness of partition, and Pakistan has this perception, which is not entirely wrong. It does have this perception that India, or the majority in India, have not reconciled with the existence of Pakistan. Fine. Because it was never a smooth partition. There were communal riots, there was huge violence, relocation of people. Fine. That is why I mentioned about Dilip Hero talking about the longest August and even after generations or more than 75 years, that bitterness continues. And in India, we often hear the voices which talk about Akhand Bharat, means Pakistan has this insecurity that India today or tomorrow will end the existence of Pakistan. So when Pakistan looks at India, Pakistan faces the existential crisis and Pakistan's crisis of identity. Another thing is you can say the big and small neighbor syndrome. So Pakistan continues to suffer from this big and small neighbor syndrome. So starting with bitterness and then having the fear that India is a bigger country, there is a huge asymmetry which enhances Pakistan's sense of insecurity and compels Pakistan to take or to do certain actions which it is not supposed to do, like nuclear arms race, going for terrorism, even at the cost of its own integrity. And you understand that how important terrorism as an issue has become for Pakistan, because the recently released and first ever document released by Pakistan, which emphasize on, like this national security document, it emphasizes on terrorism as a major threat for Pakistan's internal cohesion. Fine. And it also emphasizes that economic security should be paramount. And we understand that Pakistan pursued the costly nuclear arms race even at the cost of its economic security. But Pakistan goes for this particular behavior. And next, the sense of insecurity gets aggravated due to its defeat in all conventional wars, and when Pakistan had to lose Bangladesh and Pakistan faces internal security issues, for example, Balochistan issue. So, Pakistan remains highly insecure, and that is why Pakistan goes for asymmetric warfare. And it is believed that Pakistan's existence revolves around India, and that is why Pakistan's nationalism consists of 99% love for India, hatred for India, and only 1% love for Pakistan. So that remains a fundamental problem. So according to me, the fundamental problem, what is the fundamental problem in India, Pakistan issue is the deep sense of insecurity. So the fundamental problem in India-Pakistan issue is the deep sense of insecurity which Pakistan nurtures. It means India have to take certain actions which addresses Pakistan's insecurity. We have to see that are we doing anything to deal with this particular problem. So understand the emphasis I am giving. I am saying this is the fundamental problem. Now, along with fundamental problem, there are some other issues. This cannot be the only issue. There are other issues, or there is bigger problem that has made the situation worse. So besides the fundamental problem, what is the other problem? The other problem which makes the situation worse. Fine. And that is the strategic location of Pakistan. The strategic location of Pakistan. So Pakistan has a very strategic location. For example, in terms of access to West Asia through Iran, then Central Asia, fine, again China, again South Asia, India, then in the Arabian Sea or a major sea route. So because of Pakistan's strategic location, Pakistan and this region is always where great power will have their interests, be it USA, earlier USSR, and now China. Fine. So one reason that it becomes difficult to resolve India-Pakistan rivalry is the involvement of the great powers who prefer to go for the divide and rule policy for its strategic interests. And unfortunately, India has not been able to create any leverage on Pakistan, and the other countries have got a leverage, and the interest of US, USSR, or let us say China is served better when India and Pakistan, they are rivals. So you also have to understand that India-Pakistan rivalry is not just a bilateral issue. India-Pakistan rivalry involves various actors, various other states also. Fine. So basically, India and Pakistan relations, they are shaped by multiple factors. India-Pakistan relations are shaped by multiple factors. Fine. From domestic level. So you can say that at domestic level also there are issues. For example, if I talk from the perspective of Pakistan, so in Pakistan, the real power lies in the hands of army, and army tries to legitimize its hold by using the anti-India card. So there are domestic issues also. Again, in India also, Pakistan issue is not just an external issue. It is a very emotive issue that even the elections at the state level, they are fought. So Pakistan is an issue even in local level elections, even in a state level elections. So Pakistan is also a issue even in state level elections. Fine. So there are the domestic determinants of India and Pakistan. The second is the bilateral, that is between India and Pakistan, where Pakistan's sense of insecurity plays a role, plus you can say involvement of other actors. For example, USA, Russia, China, and now involvement of other actors also include non-state actors, fine, which shape this relationship. And if you need a sound policy towards Pakistan, we have to deal with all these. You have to manage. If India needs a sound policy towards Pakistan, again, India will have to take into account the China factor, the US factor, Russia factor, terrorism as a factor, domestic politics you have to manage, because any effort, any engagement with Pakistan can create the problem for any political party or a leader in domestic elections. So you have to manage lot of things if you have to manage the Pakistan question. Fine. But obviously we have to understand that, or we have to understand what has been India's policy towards Pakistan. Fine. So, what has been India's policy towards Pakistan? Or the another question is whether we have Pakistan policy at all or not. Fine. So, what has been India's policy towards Pakistan and whether that policy has worked? We know that the policy has not worked because the situation has not become better. Rather, situation has become worse. Plus, do we have a policy at all or we don't have a policy? Fine. So, very first question is what has been India's Pakistan policy? Suppose this question is asked in exam, you have to have an answer for this particular question. Fine. So, my simple question is what has been India's policy towards Pakistan? We all know that Pakistan has a policy towards India. Fine. So we can not say that Pakistan does not have a policy. You see lot of continuity in Pakistan's approach. But the bigger question is whether India has a policy towards Pakistan or not. Fine. So if you ask question, what is Pakistan's policy towards India? So Pakistan's policy towards India is rooted in Pakistan's sense of insecurity vis-a-vis India, plus Pakistan's understanding of its strategic location. And Pakistan always looks at India with a negative mindset. Fine. So Pakistan wants to address the asymmetry. Fine. Understand Pakistan's policy towards India from the very beginning. Pakistan's policy towards India from the very beginning reflect consistency. Fine. It reflects a consistency in the sense that they always consider India as a threat. Fine. So Pakistan's policy towards India from the very beginning emanates from Pakistan's sense of insecurity and they consider India as a threat. Fine. And in this context, Pakistan tried to manage India's challenge in various ways. Fine. So the first way Pakistan has tried to manage power asymmetry with India, fine, by looking for an external balancer. Fine. So somebody who can provide a equilibrium and fill the gap. So initially Pakistan looked towards USA, entered into the security and defense pacts with USA. Then Pakistan has looked towards China as an external balancer to manage Pakistan, to manage India's threat. Besides, Pakistan has tried to do internal balancing, means not just relying on external actors. Pakistan has also tried to enhance its own internal power or its own power. So as far as internal balancing is concerned, Pakistan has adopted two means. One is nuclear deterrence and the second is low intensity warfare, that is use of the terrorist organization. And Pakistan basically sees itself with India in the permanent state of war, and that is why Pakistan continues with India the war with various means. Fine. So Pakistan has gone for conventional war, but right now through the low intensity war, Pakistan goes for the war of attrition with India to weaken India's morale, to sap out India's strength, and to keep India involved in the long drawn battle in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And Pakistan is able to pursue the low intensity warfare under its nuclear umbrella, and where China has provided help to Pakistan to develop the nuclear deterrence, and at the same time USA has also overlooked Pakistan's attempts to develop nuclear weapons, because Pakistan has been USA's ally, whereas USA tried to put so many restrictions as well as a sort of apartheid against India's nuclear weapon program. So this is how Pakistan has tried to manage the asymmetry with India, and Pakistan does have a policy towards India, and Pakistan's policy towards India is known as bleeding India by giving 1,000 cuts. Fine, that is under the nuclear umbrella continue the use of terrorist actors. So it seems that there is a clarity in terms of the goals. There is a clarity in Pakistan in terms of the strategy, in terms of the means. But the bigger question is, what about India? The clarity with which we can explain Pakistan's India policy, can we explain India's Pakistan policy with such a clarity? Fine. So now the question is, what is India's policy towards Pakistan? What are the elements of India's policy towards Pakistan and how effective the policy is? Fine. And for me, the bigger question is, again, I am repeating, whether India has a policy for Pakistan or we don't have a policy and we simply have certain set of responses. So my question is whether we have a policy towards Pakistan at all or not. So if I ask, what is Prime Minister Modi's Pakistan policy? What is Nehru's Pakistan policy? So what is that policy? What are the elements of the policy? What are the strategies we have? So the question is, do we have a policy, or our dealing with Pakistan reflect the very fundamental weakness of India's foreign approach to foreign policy, and whether we confuse a policy with a posture, or the type of ad hocism, or is it a well thought of policy, or the set of ad hoc responses. So the question is whether we have a policy towards Pakistan, or what we consider as a policy is nothing but the set of, or what we consider as a policy is more of a posture or the set of ad hoc responses. So I have explained the criticality of having a sound policy for Pakistan. because Pakistan, being a irresponsible state, poses the existential threat. And unfortunately, if we will go for the overview of how India has dealt with Pakistan, we will see that India's seriousness with Pakistan has not been as it should have been. Fine, and our Pakistan policy reflect same weaknesses which are there when India deals with Nepal, when India deals with Sri Lanka. Lot of ad hocism is there, lack of vision is there, lack of consistency is there, and it is more of a set of ad hoc responses. Okay, and we often confuse policy and the posture. Fine, because if Pakistan's policy reflect an enormous continuity in terms of the goals, in terms of the means, so Pakistan's goal is what? To destroy India, to make India internally weak, to bleed India. And Pakistan's strategy is the permanent war against India. Initially, till 70s, it went for conventional war. From 70s onward, it went for the war of attrition. But Pakistan's means is war, and Pakistan's aim is that to weaken India both internally so that India is not able to pose any challenge to Pakistan's existence. But what has been India's policy? Do we have the clarity of goals? Do we have the clarity of means? And the means which we are employing, are they working or not? So that is the fundamental question I want to raise. Fine. So whether we have a policy or we have a posture. Fine. So what are the elements of policy? How will we decide that it is a policy and not just a posture or response? Fine. In the very first lecture, I told you about policy and how a foreign policy is known as decision making rather than problem solving. Fine. So the policy is always a long term, a long term view, not a ad hoc views. Policy will always consist of taking the long term view. Fine. So policies, the character of a policy is long term in the sense it does not change on day-to-day basis. Fine. So policy cannot change on day-to-day basis. How our policy changes on day-to-day basis is evident that Prime Minister Modi, he invited the head of all SAARC countries including Pakistan to his first oath-taking ceremony. He went out of the way and visited the house of the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif. again, but he is the one who didn't continue the policy of talk, went for the surgical strikes, the Balakot strike, and so on. So the question is whether India didn't knew that the talks with Pakistan are not going to help, or we were so politically naive to understand or not to understand that if India will make an attempt to talk, they are going to be the responses in the form of terrorist attacks, because there are people on that side of the border who have the stakes or who have interest in India Pakistan to remain as a eternal enemies, and the number is huge. I can tell the non-state actors in Pakistan has an interest that India Pakistan should never come together. The army in Pakistan has an interest that India and Pakistan should never come together. The smugglers on the border have an interest that India and Pakistan do not come together or officially go for free trade, because that impacts their revenue or their income. The political parties on this side of the border, whether it is in Kashmir or rest part of India, there are many political parties who also have an interest that these two countries should not come together. I can say the media in India and Pakistan also has an interest, because their TRP increases if there are tensions, and the TRP goes down, fine, if there are no wars, no such tensions. So there, where is the lobby? Who is that lobby which has an interest in better relations? And whether in both the countries that lobby is strong enough. So there has to be someone who wants peace, and that someone or that some group who wants peace, are they effective enough in both the countries? Fine. So it's a bigger issue. So first of all, policy has a long-term view, and a policy cannot cannot be like an instant coffee or cannot change overnight. This is what I believe. And the second thing is, the policy should have a clarity of goals. And from time to time, you can go for mid-course correction, like Pakistan has done the course correction by shifting the war from conventional to the non-conventional wars. Fine. Policy need not to be static. It has to be based on continuous appraisals, revaluation and all. Fine. So the very first thing is, what is the ultimate goal? So policy means you have to define the goal, and you have to select the means to pursue the goals. So I can say with complete confidence that in India's policy towards Pakistan, the fundamental problem is the lack of clarity. We do not know what is our goal. Fine. So the first flaw, one fundamental flaw in India's Pakistan policy, the flaw in India's Pakistan policy and that flaw is whether we know what is the end game. What do we want to do with Pakistan? What is our goal? Fine. And when you deal with something so serious and to be able to pursue that goal, the question is you have to first get the domestic consensus over that goal. It should not happen that, see, foreign policies should be based on the long-term view, lot of strategic thinking, and it should not change overnight. It should not change with the changes in the government. It should not happen that one government has a policy of peace with Pakistan and the other government has a policy of war with Pakistan. So the first thing is, what is our goal? What is the end game? What do we want from our Pakistan's policy? What is the ultimate objective? Fine. So if the very first question is, what is the end game? Or do we have an end game, or we are playing the game without any objective in mind? So what is the end game of India's Pakistan policy? Fine. So if we see the official narrative, fine, the official narrative by and large is, and if we go by the statements on even neighborhood first policy, the official narrative is we want peace with neighbors. So the official narrative is, and this is the official narrative even in Pakistan also, that we want to live in peace and as good neighbors. So we have to go for peace with Pakistan. But if we look into the unofficial narrative which we see at the time of elections, which we see into many nationalist section of Indian media, that anybody talking about peace with Pakistan is portrayed as anti-national. And if you're anti-national, you may end up in jails, you can be put under preventive detention laws also. Fine. So the thing is, if we are talking about peace, but everywhere there is a hatred, fine, so we give a very confusing signal. Fine. So if we are looking for peace, then we have to make investment in those steps which give us peace. We have to look. You can't have a peace by the means of war. I don't say that we should have a goal for peace with Pakistan, but at least we should have a goal, whether we want peace or we want war with Pakistan. What do we want from Pakistan? So there has to be a clarity. Do you want peace? Do you want trade? Do you want transit? Or you do not want peace? Fine. So the official goal is peace. But is it just a discourse, or do we really mean what we say? Fine. And how will you decide that it is not just a discourse and we really mean it? What we say, we have to review the actions which India has taken, or the actions in, or the investment which we have made for peace. So both countries talk about peace. Pakistan's national security strategy talks about peace with India, but what happens is, as far as India and Pakistan is concerned, if we look at official statements, we don't see that the words are matched with the action. There is a big gap between what we say and what we do, and there is lack of seriousness, lack of patience which is required to bring peace in such a state of relations. Fine. So the question is, what do you want with Pakistan? Peace with Pakistan? So the goals or the end games of India's Pakistan policy. What is the end game? Do you want peace with Pakistan? Fine. Or do you want war with Pakistan? So Pakistan has a clarity that we do not want peace, we want war with Pakistan. The official narrative is obviously different, and Pakistan is continuing war since the very day it has come into existence. And what is happening is, Pakistan is initiating the wars and we are responding. So goals here is being determined by Pakistan and not India, and we are responding to Pakistan. Fine. But as far as India is concerned, what is our goal? Do you want peace or do you want war? Fine. So India says India is a peace-loving country, and we want to live in peace with the neighborhood. But the question is whether we have taken the effective steps for peace, whether we have taken the effective steps for peace or not. Fine. So India can also choose its goal, war or peace with Pakistan. Now, what should be the goal? What should be the goal of India's policy towards Pakistan? So you can have any, subject to the condition it is rational, but as far as I believe, though this is my personal view, I am not recommending anything, is that we have to come to the terms of the existence of Pakistan. Despite the huge bitterness with the partition, we have to accept that Pakistan exists as a country. We have to accept that Pakistan is our neighbor, and since Pakistan is our neighbor, it is always better if we can live in peace with Pakistan. So the ideal situation is that we accept the existence of Pakistan, and not only we accept the existence of Pakistan, we should be in a position to communicate to Pakistan that we have reconciled with the fact of partition. So let us not, both India and Pakistan, they have to move on with the time. Unfortunately, they are stuck with 1947, and that is why Dilip Hero talks about this longest August thing. So India has to accept the existence of Pakistan, and India has to stop thinking about Akhand Bharat. Fine, it's that. The two things is India has to accept the existence of Pakistan, and India has to communicate with Pakistan that India does not have any such designs. Communicate with Pakistan that we accept the fact of Pakistan's existence. At the same time, Pakistan also have to accept the predominant status of India in the right manner, and not in the interest of India but in the interest of its own people. It should think about the peace with India, and Pakistan also have to accept that Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part and Pakistan is not going to be successful in changing the status quo in Kashmir. Both the countries will have to accept that the present status quo in terms of Kashmir under Pakistan or under India, it's a matter of fact, and none of these countries have capacity to change the status quo. Fine. So basically, India and Pakistan, they have reached to a level of stalemate. Means neither of them can change the status quo in Kashmir. So they have to be more mature in understanding this particular fact that India cannot lose and Pakistan cannot win. It is impossible for Pakistan to gain the control over Indian side of Kashmir, and at the same time it is impossible for India to think of the merger of Pakistan occupied Kashmir, considering that Pakistan has a nuclear weapons and Pakistan's nuclear policy is the first use, and Pakistan's nuclear policy says that. Fine. So first of all, Pakistan has kept the option of nuclear weapon open if India tries to change the status at LOC. Fine. So Pakistan has kept its option. This does not mean we are frightened with Pakistan, but the nuclear weapons result into the mutually assured destruction and no one gets benefited if there is a nuclear war. So avoiding nuclear war is not a symbol of India's weakness, but it is a symbol of India's rationality. Fine. So we cannot change it. Fine. Now the second thing is Kashmir is listed as a disputed issue in UN, and India's own first Prime Minister Pandit Nehru took the Kashmir issue to United Nations, and United Nations resolutions suggest that no unilateral attempts should be made to alter the status quo. And when India is aspiring to be a permanent member of UNSC and India not following UNSC resolutions, this is not going to augur well for India's case, and it will rather strengthen the support for Pakistan. So from its own side also, India should not be doing any such attempts at a huge cost, and then when India is committed to follow the international law and India itself aims to be a permanent member of UN Security Council, any attempt by India to change unilaterally the ceasefire line or line of control will have will work for huge disadvantage towards India's fine. And so these countries, and not only this, even the Shimla Agreement of 1972, which India always suggests should be the basis to solve the Kashmir issue, also suggests that no party will try to change the status quo unilaterally, and the matter will be resolved bilaterally through the dialogue. Fine. So the first thing is, from my perspective, what should be our approach? Obviously, our approach should be peace. It's not that you are talking about peace because you are fearful of Pakistan, but we are talking about peace because as a responsible member of international community and as a country or as a government which understand the cost of nuclear escalation and concerned with the pains it will inflict on our people, we have to act in a responsible manner, irrespective of the fact that Pakistan acts as a mad child. If anybody is aware of the chicken game concept in international politics, it shows that it is not rational to think about or prioritize the ego. Fine. Ego should not be the basis for a rational policy. You have to go for a very rationalistic calculation. Can we afford a nuclear war? Fine. So ideally you should go for peace, and we do talk officially also about peace, but peace will come at the cost. And the question is whether we are ready to invest in peace, or we are ready to pay the cost. What is the cost of the peace, and what will be the method, or what will be the means to achieve, how will you achieve the peace, and what is going to be the cost of the peace? That is to be understood. So the ideal policy has to be peace, but we have to see whether there is a domestic consensus and whether there is a possibility to pursue the policy of peace with Pakistan, because it will come at a cost. So if we pursue a policy of peace, how? and what is the cost, and whether what is the probability. There are 2-3 questions we have to answer. Fine. If our policy is the policy of peace, fine. If our policy is policy of peace, the next thing is how to go about it. And what is the cost? And even we should be calculating that whether the cost of peace is more than the cost of war. So we should be very much clear about the cost, because any war will ultimately escalate into the nuclear war, and using nuclear weapons as the weapons of war is going to be madness. And we can have a scenario where South Asia becomes a continent of orphans. We can't even imagine the amount of destruction this will cost. And since the time of Hiroshima Nagasaki, there is so much upgradation in the technology and in potency of the nuclear weapons. So if we think about peace, we also need, and if we have to weigh the options of war and peace, we also need to opt or think that the cost of peace is going to be higher or the cost of war, and how to go about it, and what is the cost. Now, peace with Pakistan will be something which you cannot achieve overnight, and which will be a test of patience. Peace with Pakistan is going to test our patience, and it is going to test our commitment and belief in peace and non-violence. And as Gandhi said that non-violence cannot be a weapon of weak, it can only a weapon of strong. Means you have to have a strong willpower, you have to have strong soul force, you have to have a lot of courage. Fine. You need to have a vision, you need courage to pursue the policy of peace. Now, how to go about peace? We have to take the steps which are called, which we can say, the confidence building steps. Fine. So peace with Pakistan needs to take steps which are called as the confidence building measures. We need to take the steps which go for confidence building, because The war happens due to insecurity. Insecurity happens when you lack the trust. So, what is how to go about peace with Pakistan? You have to address the trust deficit. Fine, address the trust deficit, or basically you have to go for building the trust, or which is called as confidence building measures. And how you go about the confidence building measures? How do you develop the trust? How these confidence building measures? So, in order to address the trust deficit, fine, we have to create the environment of trust rather than the environment of hatred. Right now, in both the countries, what we see is the environment of hatred is increasing, whereas what is needed is to create an environment of trust. So, environment of trust comes when you go for the resolution of disputes. You have to know how to work together, and if you can achieve the resolution of disputes, and for resolution of disputes, either you can do it by war, but right now we are not vouching for war. We are talking about peace. So, if you want a resolution of disputes, then you will have to adopt the peaceful manner. Fine, you don't go for war for the resolution of disputes, because even if no, war does not settle the disputes. War give rise to new disputes. Fine, war give rise to new scars, and the things become worse. Things do not become better. Fine. So you have to look for the peaceful method of the resolution of disputes. Fine. So, what is going to be the peaceful methods? Means either you go for bilateral level dialogue, because ultimately the solution can come only with dialogue. So either you go for the you will have to go for dialogue through the bilateral level, or you can take recourse of the international law, the platforms like International Court of Justice, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, you can go for mediation. So you have to explore the peaceful method. Fine. But to explore the peaceful methods, let's say using international law, third party mediation, etc., this requires the agreement between the parties in dispute. Now, this agreement between the parties in dispute, how it will emerge? How will you reach to it? The only way you have to go for is through dialogue. Fine. So, any first stage, any first step for the peaceful resolutions of dispute is going to be that you go for talk. Fine. You have to enter into a dialogue. You have to go for communications. Fine. You have to talk with each other. You have to talk with each other. Fine. Rather than talking at each other. Because only talks will create an environment of peace. Fine. So you have to talk, because only through dialogue you can agree that we can solve the matter in a peaceful manner. And if we do not go for talk, ultimately this is going to lead us to nowhere other than war. And I said that a sensible policy is always to avoid the war. So we will have to go for the dialogue and we will have to go for communication. Means at present it is urgent to resume the composite dialogue. So what is important at present is that India and Pakistan, they should go for the resumption of the composite dialogue. Fine. Now what is this composite dialogue? Since when this dialogue is not happening, and why this dialogue should happen? So this composite dialogue process, composite dialogue process, it is started during the time of Vajpayee government. Fine. And it was the outcome of Islamabad summit of SAARC. It was an outcome of Islamabad summit of SAARC. What is the urgent need? the resumption of the composite dialogue, which started during Vajpayee's time, and the idea became started in the 2004 Islamabad summit. Fine. Now, it is worth to understand the composite dialogue. So you have to understand that 2004 Islamabad summit, and this has led to the process of composite dialogue. Fine. And you should be clear that whenever the dialogue takes place between India and Pakistan, it's very difficult that the push comes from inside. Rather, it is always somewhere the involvement of the third party. For example, Tashkent Agreement involved USSR. So if I talk about composite dialogue, the push for this dialogue came from USA, and you understand that India-US relations had become quite close, that Vajpayee has called US India's natural ally also, and because US was fighting the war in Afghanistan, which started in 2001, and to be able to win the war, it was very essential that the relations between India and Pakistan, they become normal, so that, because what happens is, what we will see in the topic in Afghanistan, that Afghanistan is suffering primarily because of India and Pakistan rivalry, because what is happening there is the proxy war between India and Pakistan. So US gave the push for the composite dialogue. Now, what was the rationale? What is the theory behind composite dialogue, and what exactly is a composite dialogue? Fine. So first of all, you have to understand that India and Pakistan, they have dispute on multiple issues. Fine. India and Pakistan have a dispute on multiple issues. What are these issues? So if I talk from the perspective of Pakistan, Pakistan believes that the biggest issue is Kashmir, and until and unless we do not solve Kashmir issue, Kashmir is the biggest issue for the trust deficit between India and Pakistan, and until and unless we do not solve the Kashmir issue, it will not be possible to bridge the trust deficit. So Pakistan always prioritize the Kashmir issue. But if we look from India, India says that Kashmir is not an issue. Kashmir is a domestic issue for India. Kashmir is an integral part of India. It's a domestic issue, and the real issue is not Kashmir but terrorism. So when you have to talk, the first of all, you have to decide the agenda of talks. So what should be the agenda? Should we talk about Kashmir first, or should we talk about terrorism first? So one problem has always been there, that we have not been able to decide the agenda. So in this context came the formula of composite dialogue, most probably USA, and the idea is that don't just talk on, don't go for talking on Kashmir or terrorism, rather bring all the issues you have and let's have a talk on all the issues. So the dialogue should not be just on Kashmir, or dialogue should not be just on terrorism, but bring everything on the platter, bring all issues which you think are the issues between India and Pakistan. So consequently, 8 issues were listed. Because of these 8 issues, you call it as a composite dialogue. Means you are talking on various issues and not just one or two issues. So now what are the 8 issues? Both agreed that we have to talk on Kashmir. India agreed. Next was terrorism. Next you can say we also have Siachen issue, then Sar Creek issue, then Tulbul navigation project, something related to Indus Water Treaty. Fine. Then economic, trade and commerce, then culture, promote people to people contacts, and the 8th issue is nuclear safety and security issue. So since 8 issues were earmarked to be the issues for discussion, came this composite dialogue. Okay. Now this composite dialogue process is also based on one theory of international relations, and that theory is known as the liberal theory of international relations, and it is based on the functionalism. Fine. So these 8 issues or the composite dialogue process is based on the liberal theory of international relations known as functionalism. Fine. This liberal theory is known as functionalism. Now what is functionalism? Functionalism was first applied in case of Europe. You know that Europe has witnessed the 2 world wars and the numerous wars, and France and Germany they have been eternal enemies, but today the nature of the relationship has transformed quite qualitatively, and from the area of the world wars, Europe has become the area of peace and prosperity. So in Europe, this experiment was done, and this experiment was supposed to be replicated in case of India and Pakistan. So what does this functionalism suggest? This functionalism is also known as peace by pieces. The functionalism is known as piece by pieces. Piece by pieces means make a list of the issues. Fine. And for example, India and Pakistan have laid down the 8 issues for composite dialogue. So this is piece by pieces. Fine. Means, and then you divide the issues or categorize. I'll say what you can do, you can categorize the issues between highly conflictual and less conflictual. Highly conflictual issues and less conflictual issues. Fine, you can call it issues of high politics, more sensitive issues, and less sensitive issues. You must have heard or you must have read somewhere that in India we used to call it as the doable and non-doable issues. So less conflictual issues, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh used to mention doable and non-doable issues, means more sensitive and less sensitive issues. Now, non-doable issues or more sensitive issues are between India and Pakistan is Kashmir issue and then the nuclear issue. And it is believed that the less sensitive issue is or more doable issue is Siachen, Sar Creek, Tulbul, navigation, project, trade and commerce, culture and terrorism. Like, it is easy to talk on these issues. Fine. So doable and non-doable. What happens is, because Kashmir is a most sensitive issue, and to be frank, we do not find any solution of Kashmir issue in any short term or even in long term, but because the entire thing get stuck up on the Kashmir issue, we are unable to take up other issues which are less conflictual, doable, and where the possibility of arriving at consensus does exist. Fine. And what happens if we have any breakthrough or we are able to address or achieve any of these issues, this is going to act as a confidence building measure. Fine. This can create a climate of trust. Okay, suppose India and Pakistan solve Sir Creek. India and Pakistan are able to go ahead with trade. And as you know that the new security policy of Pakistan, it suggests as of now, Pakistan is giving some indications. Fine. For example, Pakistan agreed for the Kartarpur corridors opening. Pakistan agreed for the ceasefire, observing the ceasefire at LOC agreement, and the recent national security policy of Pakistan does talk about its intention to improve relations with India, prioritize geoeconomics over geopolitics, and Pakistan has also proposed that we should go for the resumption of the composite dialogue, we should resume the dialogue. But of course, Pakistan cannot go for the unconditional things. They will put the condition. They need a face-saving thing in their own to satisfy their own domestic constituency. So the new security doctrine says that it is conditional, that India should take steps in case of Jammu and Kashmir and all. They will put up these conditions, that's fine. But right now there are some indications. Fine, we will never be able to arrive at a situation where there will be complete adherence of the ceasefire line, and let's not be politically naive to assume that Pakistan will not be using terrorism at all, because there has been no reason not to do so, though there has been certain intentions, that have been certain indications in the past. Even the Pakistani army chief has given this Bajwa doctrine, which also talks about some sort of peace in neighborhood. So there are indications Pakistan is proposing for the talks, and India need to seize the movement. You have to seize the opportunity, you have to seize the moment. Fine, you have to understand that some ray of hope. I don't say that we will be able to solve the problems, or it will be very easy for India to trust that Pakistan really wants to have talk, but they are giving us indications. And we also need to understand that if we don't talk, then what else? Then the only option remains is war. But are we ready to pay the cost of the war? And the way China and Pakistan axis is developing, do we think that going for a two-front war, there is a probability of two-front war, and should we really venture into such type of imaginations? Fine. So let's be realistic enough. And one thing is, long time back, there is a scholar, I'm not remembering the name right now, he held that the wars are never beneficial even for the victors. So yes, that scholar is Norman Angell, and he has written a book, The Great Illusion. So it's an illusion to think that war benefits the victor. In fact, war does not benefit anybody. War only results into destruction, orphans, I can also talk about like Arjun's dilemma, Arjun talking to Krishna, that ultimately what will be the end of the war? What will be the consequence of the war? Fine. So it's a different matter, and there's a lot of debate on Arjun and Krishna's position in Amartya Sen's theory of justice and all. That's a different thing, but we have to understand, before flirting with the idea of war, we have to pay heed to the advice of Norman Angell, who says in his book The Great Illusion that it is an illusion if you think that war is beneficial even to the victor. And today, the world in which we are living, there is going to be the nuclear war. And the nuclear war, you know that if anybody understands the theories of international politics or some views on nuclear weapons, it is always believed that nuclear weapons will make war unthinkable, because any such war will be at a cost that no rational country should be willing to pay. However, it does not mean that I am suggesting that we should be succumbing to the nuclear blackmailing of Pakistan. Fine. But again, we have to be very practical in understanding that the road to peace with Pakistan is certainly not going to be easy. One of the most interactable disputes, and where the obstacles are many, and the constituencies willing for war are actually increasing. The unfavorable environment is decreasing, and talking about peace with Pakistan can even, like, we have become so sensitive that even open dialogue is also not possible. So, but think rationally, forget with Pakistan, think rationally that war is never a sound option. It doesn't benefit even the victor, and it's not about we are frightened with the war. Wars had happened, and we have complete trust in our military, in our army, in the people, and above God, that we are on the right side of the history. So the outcomes of war are going to be favorable to India, but still war should not be an option, and there has to be a serious investment in the peace, which require the dialogue. Fine. So India should seize the moment. Now, there are like people who can say that talking with Pakistan, and how come we can trust Pakistan? See, starting dialogue with Pakistan is a very difficult task. Fine, because over a period of time, the peace constituency has declined considerably. The conducive environment has also changed, and then the huge trust deficit that exists between India and Pakistan will always prevent us from trusting, because trust deficit is not there. We do not trust, and the general argument is always that Do you think that the general argument is, or it is a belief that dialogue will not yield any solution? And there is a huge possibility of this thing also, that the dialogue will not lead to the solution, because I believe that it will be very difficult to sustain the dialogue. Fine. So again, it's a matter, if you have a faith in your idea, you can sustain the idea, but dialogue will yield to any solution. Obviously, whenever we talk about India and Pakistan, there is a lot of pessimism, but we also need to ask this question: if not dialogue, then what? Fine. So the question is, if not dialogue, then what? Obviously, ultimately war. So talking with Pakistan is not that we can have solutions, but it is about giving peace a chance. So before war, war is a destiny of India and Pakistan. We have already seen this in the past, but can't we change the destiny? At least we should try. We should try to change the destiny. Destiny plays the role, but your choices, your karma, even Krishna says, fine, that through your karma you can change the destiny. So though the narrative is that war is a destiny, but through dialogue we can give peace a chance, and we know that sometimes, God knows, but sometimes miracles do happen. And here there is an example of France and Germany. Fine. So why not let us give peace a chance? But there are a lot of problems in this, and the biggest problem is the cost and the pessimism that prevails, because we have a lot of arguments that the talks in past have not yielded. It is true. So not having a solution, we should not be so optimistic that the solution will come. It will take 100 years to bring a solution. Fine. After 100 years of rivalry, you cannot have solution in a day or two. Fine. And the talks in the past have not yielded. And the biggest thing that stops us from the talking is that whenever talks take place, India had to suffer from the terrorist attack. For example, the composite dialogue process was taking place when in 2008 we had to suffer from the Mumbai terror attack. Mumbai terror attack. And since then we have become quite firm that no talks with terror. Fine. So we have become quite firm with no talks with terror. So after Mumbai, there was a change in the government. Prime Minister Modi took the initiative for resumption of the talk by going out of the way to Nawaz Sharif's house and then going for shawl diplomacy and mango diplomacy. But after he visited Nawaz Sharif's house, there was attack in Pathankot, there was attack in Uri, and it becomes difficult to sustain the talk and to sustain the momentum for talk. Fine, it will require lot of statesmanship to be able to talk. So the thing is, when we decide for peace, we start initiatives for dialogue, because if we look for peace, dialogue is the only option. Fine. And at the same time, we all know that whenever dialogue will happen, there is bound to be the terrorist attack, and we have already told to the terrorists that no talk with terror means we are sure still we have to talk, but convincing the people in India when the foreign policy has been hijacked with the nationalist media or ultra nationalist media, it becomes very, very difficult. Fine. The attacks are bound to take place because there are people on both sides of borders. Borders who do not want peace, who do not want the resolution of dispute, because continuation of the rivalry keeps them relevant, be it army in Pakistan, be it non-state actors in Pakistan, be it political parties on both sides of the borders and including in Kashmir, be it the smugglers on both sides of the borders who will never want the free trade. Fine. It is assumed that, or it is believed that right now the bilateral trade between India and Pakistan through the legal channels is about 3 billion and the illegal trade is around 10 billion or 7 billion, and it is believed that the moment legal and free trade is allowed, the bilateral trade is going to jump to the level of $10 billion in a year from today's 2 or 3 billion. So there are people who will not want peace. Now, they are going to obstruct the peace. And what you require is not the politicians, but the statesmen who believe in the power of their idea, and who continue to work for their vision, though this requires extraordinary courage, because the events like Pulwama happen, the temperatures rise so much that it will be very difficult for any leader, any political leader, to continue to talk with Pakistan, considering the type of environment that exists. That is why what I suggest, that the solutions are not going to be easy, and it will require a statesmanship. And what happens is, every Indian Prime Minister has taken the initiative, including Prime Minister Modi taking extraordinary initiative for peace. But the problem is, they have not been able to sustain fine. So basically, this peace process, this gets sabotaged by those who do not want peace, and unfortunately this small section is able to prevail over the people who would like to invest in peace, and who would prefer that the peace should be sustained. So what happens is, from talk we revert back to no talks. And in this situation, what happens is, our policy appears to be a posturing. It appears to be the ad hoc responses rather than any sustained vision, and a question mark arises. Fine, this led to the question mark whether India has a policy, and what is this policy? Obviously, you will require very different type of a statesmanship and leadership to work with the idea of peace in the subcontinent. The time is running out fast, and I always say time is the most valuable thing. More time passes, more we sit and postpone the things, the situations become all the more difficult. Understand the pulse, catch the moment. Machiavelli, one of the you can say one of the greatest political philosopher and strategists, has given this advice in his book Prince, that Prince should have a capacity, or should have ability to seize the moment. And try to turn the movement in your favor. Fine, but the thing is, are we in a position to pay the cost? Do we have that much belief in the idea of peace that we will continue with the peace even when such type of provocations happen? Will it be possible, considering the extremely polarized and the divisive politics in India as well as in Pakistan, will it be possible that we know that those who are not interested in peace, they are going to put us in extreme provocations? But what will be our approach? Will we yield to the pressure or will we sustain? And obviously the onus lie more on India than on Pakistan, India being more responsible stakeholder in international peace. So are we ready to pay the price? I believe that it will be very difficult and you need some extraordinary personality, something who like, I can't say that this is feasible, but it is what should be. And again, it is also essential that suppose Pulwama type of incident happen, it is very natural that you do not go for talk, but at some point of time you will have to resume the talks, because we cannot let a status quo become from bad to worse, and we have a responsibility towards our children, towards the people in South Asia, and we have to rescue them from that Banku's ghost. So this is something, but I don't see the possibility of this happening. So ultimately, what will be our option? Obviously, since we do not have capacity or courage to continue with the policy of peace, we have to go for war. We have no, or we may end up in no other situation but to go for war. Now, once we decide for war, then also we should be ready to pay the cost. But again, I recommend, before exploring the option of the war, go for the cost and benefit analysis of both the options, the war and peace. So now let us believe that the way things are moving, we are obviously on the direction of the war. Fine. So now, and I think this is going to be more easier option in the short term and more populist option, and there will be a greater inclination also, and our media and Bollywood and all will also create more such environment for war. So now let us go for then the preparedness of war. Fine. So let us be prepared for war. Fine. And for war, how to conduct the war with Pakistan, because we will be more inclined for this option rather than peace option, because peace option will have dividend in the long term and the war option can have the immediate dividends in terms of election and others. So I believe the inclination will be for war more. So let us go for war. Now, how to conduct the war? What are the strategies of war? And what are the cards which India can take place? So as far as the strategy of war, we can take the reference of Kautilya, our master strategist, and he says that war can be of the different types. Fine. So there can be a direct and conventional war. There can be a proxy war. Which type of war we have to do with Pakistan? Again, we need a serious thinking about it. So, we have to decide which war, the conventional war, the proxy war. If I give reference to Sun Tzu, he talks about the psychological war. Fine. So, even the weapons of mass destruction, because time and again we also hear that scholars or the leaders suggesting that India should change its nuclear policy and from no first use we should go for the first use policy, especially as far as the Pakistan is concerned, and we have to see that is there any possibility of the limited war under the nuclear umbrella. So again, I believe we all will choose as a reflex action the option of war and not the option of peace. But again, we have to think about which type of war. Fine. Obviously, whenever we are thinking about war, we have to understand that given a fact that both the two countries possess the nuclear weapons, the conventional war is going to escalate into the nuclear war. So we have to see how are we going to address this, or do we have a capacity to conduct the limited war, and then as suggested by our national security advisor, we have to talk with Pakistan in the language they understand. Means if Pakistan goes for the proxy war in Kashmir, we can use the Balochistan card against Pakistan, And if you have read Kautilya gives Shat Gunya Siddhant, various policies, and in the war you can also have the pressure techniques where you can use the option of Indus Water Treaty. You can come out of Indus Water Treaty. Plus, India can use its rising diplomatic profile to isolate Pakistan or to make the game more difficult for Pakistan. So, though my inherent desire is always peace, but I believe that the lobby for peace is not that strong. So I can only think that the preferred option is going to be the war. But again, we have to think about the strategies of war. So I'll discuss various options India can explore with a mindset of war to deal with Pakistan in the next